Y'all not here to hear about me, so everything will be about what you're here for.
Have you started?
Yes.
Will you state your full name?
Edward R. Winburn,
Where were you born?
Little Rock, Arkansas.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I've had 3 older brothers and an older sister.
Did any of them also serve?
2 older brothers, both were in the Marine Corps, as I was. One was in World War II, and both of them were in Korea.
So what were you doing before you served?
I had graduated from high school, and I was working for a civil engineer on a surveying crew.
So how old were you when you first enlisted?
I enlisted in August 12th, 1952.
And how old were you?
I was born in 33, so I was 19.
All right. And then what branch of the military did you serve?
Served in the Marine Corps.
What was your rank?
Everybody starts out in boot camp as private, and then you're promoted to PFC, private first class, and then corporal, sergeant, so on and so forth. I was a private first class when I was in Korea.
Is there anything else you wanted to be other than Marines?
No, my 2 older brothers and I had always wanted to be Marines.
So how long did you serve?
Well, I'm active in reserve. I went in, as I say, in August 1952, and I was retired from the reserve in 1983.
So why did you want to enlist?
I got a draft notice from the Army, and I didn't want to be in the Army.
So what was training like? If you just want to tell like your own story now.
It was, well, boot camp is what they call it. They don't call it basic training like the Army does, or the Navy, or I guess maybe the Air Force. People that usually live west of the Mississippi go to San Diego. People that live east of the Mississippi usually go to Parris Island, South Carolina. And you have 12 weeks. And you have a little bit of everything. You first week or 2 or 3 is mostly indoctrination and studying things like Marine Corps history and that type thing, and learning how to drill and learning how to operate weapons. Then you have usually a couple of weeks at the rifle range where you learn to shoot. And you also have a week of mess duty where everybody has to serve at least 7 days in the mess hall. So it's a little bit of everything. And then a lot of physical training.
So did you have any like instructors that you didn't like, or any like friends?
Well, nobody likes their drill instructor because he's on your backside all the time, and you can never do anything right. When you go in, they tell you you're the lowest form of life on the earth. But after a little while, when you start to realize what it's all about and why they are so hard on you, you know that they want you to be able to take care of yourself. And it's just like a football coach, which I was, civilian life. They work you and work you and work you and work you, and you think you're going to drop. But as I say, after a while, you realize why they're doing what they're doing, and you realize it's for your own benefit. And when you get out of boot camp, you have a great deal of respect for your drill instructors, and most of them have been combat veterans. 2 that I had were both World War II veterans that had served in the South Pacific. So they knew what they were talking about. Excuse me.
Did you have any friends? Like, did you meet anybody at boot camp?
Oh, yeah. Several of us went to Korea together. And let's see, I had a kid named Gordon Stark. He was from Chicago, Illinois. Let's see, who else? Oh gosh. Ricardo Villalobos was from El Paso, Texas. Jim Kern was from Detroit, Michigan. One kid from Kentucky, I can't think of his first name right now, but from all over.
Oh, I understand. Where was the first place you went in Korea?
Well, when you get there, you dock at the port of Incheon, which is on the west coast of Korea. And you're assigned there to an outfit, and they usually take you in a pickup truck, or not a pickup truck, and it's what we call 6-bys, which are big trucks that can hold about 15, 16 people. And then they take you up to the unit where you're going to be, and for 3 days you just kind of stand around and find out what's going on before they ask you to do anything.
So what was life like your first 3 days?
Well, you always feel like you're an outsider when you get someplace new, and you kind of keep to yourself, and you want to make sure that you don't do anything wrong, say anything wrong or do anything wrong. And you want the guys you're with to, like you. And you want to, of course, you want to share your part of what's going on. You want to do your part.
So was there anything weird about the food or where you slept?
The food was sea rations, and usually ate those out of this pan here. You can see it breaks down.
Oh.
And you have a knife, a fork, and a spoon.
And this was just attached to your backpack?
No, you put it in the back in your pack here. And then you also own a canteen. I don't know if I can get it out or not, this belt. Psst. Doggone it. It's kind of hard to get out. There we go. This is the cup, and you can see the handle is like that.
Oh, cool.
And you slide this up and put it down like that, and then it stays. And then when you're through, it's been a long time since this thing's been out. There we go. And when you're through, you just put it back.
That's cool.
In your pouch back here, canteen cover.
What else do you have on your belt?
This is a sidearm. It's a 45 caliber automatic. It holds 7 rounds. And you can pass that around if you want to. This is the clip that goes in it that holds your ammunition. The clip goes in the bottom of the handle here. And what you want to make sure that you don't do is this has a spring in it. And you don't want to put too many rounds in here at one time, because it'll take the spring out of this and it won't feed properly, and it may jam on you. So you want to make sure that you don't overdo it with that. And also I got another weapon over here. This is an M1 rifle.
All right.
This is what everybody uses. Everybody's issued one of these. It weighs 9.5 pounds. And it has a clip of 8 rounds. You can see it's pretty heavy. Now these are blanks. I have served on burial details for retired service people here in Memphis when they have funerals and they want a mandatory funeral. But these are blanks. But these are just like regular ammunition, except regular ammunition have the lead bullets on the end. As you can see, there are 8 rounds in here. That is a semi-automatic. Each round that you fire, the hammer or the slide will come back and eject the shell casing and then go back. It's semi-automatic. You have to squeeze the trigger. Right here is the safety. Well, you have to push that back for the safety. Yeah. Hold that for a second. Okay. Now you put this right on top and push it down, and then you depress it, let it slide forward, and that's ready to fire. I don't know what's wrong with the safety. Anyway, as I say, it's semi-automatic. On the end here, you have a lug where the bayonet goes.
So would you always carry your gun?
Well, first thing, Marine Corps, you don't call it a gun.
Rifle?
It's a rifle, yeah. Usually, well, not usually. Officers all have 45s, and some of them carry carbines, which are smaller than the M1. And your enlisted men have rifles. Now you have people that are enlisted men that have sidearms, have 45s. People that are on crew-served weapons like machine guns or mortars or something of that nature also carry these because they have to carry their weapon. And you get several different kinds of mortars. For instance, you've got a 60 mortar, which has a bipod like this and a base plate that the tube sits on, and the tube. Now, those are not too big, but then you also have an 81 millimeter mortar. 60 mortars about that high, 81's up about here. And then you've got a 4 deuce, which is 4.5 inches, which has to be pulled by something mechanized. So, and then of course, to clean that weapon, you have ramrod, and it screws together. So here's the handle, and you can see there's a space in the bottom, and you put a piece of cotton through there, and this is long enough that it goes all the way down the barrel, all the way to the end. So that's how you clean your weapon out after you fired it. And of course, everybody has a knife. These are not issued, and you use your own. And I noticed all the pictures from Vietnam that they all wore all of them up here on their strap, harness strap on their pack. What I did, I tied mine around the leg down here. Excuse me.
So did you serve in more than one place?
No, just not one place. It was north of the Im River, which runs out from Seoul. I'll use this in just a minute, but it's north central Korea. This is something that everybody in boot camp got one of those, and everybody carried it. A lot of people didn't admit to it, but a lot of them did. And here's a sewing kit that also goes in the pack. Have needles, threads, safety pin, because your mother wasn't there to sew up your clothes. This is what's called a light marching pack. This camouflage is a shelter half tent. You and a buddy get together and you can each hook them together and make a tent where you can sleep. Also, it serves as a poncho. You can put it on and it'll keep you from getting soaking wet. You'll notice how it's tied like this. You tie it like this, so if you're walking through the wooded area, the branches won't grab it and pull it off of you. You carry anything you want to, shaving gear, Bible, sewing kit, socks, extra socks, and other things. Now this is what's called an entrenching tool, and it works two ways. You can tighten it up like this and use it as a shovel. Then you can loosen it, tighten it down here. You've got a pick. So it's a useful tool. Nobody likes to use them because they made you have to work a lot. Okay, I've got some stuff over here on the table that you might want to look at after we get through. But say here's a map of Korea. These are the flags of all the countries that sent people there to fight. And these here are different American troops. This is 1st Marine Division insignia here. This is the 7th Cavalry here. That's Air Force insignia. And I don't know what the rest of these are. Mr. McElwain could probably tell you, since he's in the Army, and these are all Army insignias down here.
Before y'all leave, I'll get a picture of y'all.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Y'all together, what do you think of the class and everything?
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't know if you can see. I'll get it up closer where you can see it a little better. As far as topography goes, this is 38th parallel right here, latitude. And after World War II was over, they decided that was the way they were going to divide Korea into north and south. You can see it's very mountainous. The farther north you get, the higher the mountains get. Now,
So what was the weather like?
weather in the summer, it'd get up over 100 degrees. In winter, you can get down below 30 degrees, below zero. Now, here, I want you to pick this up. And let me see the rifle. And put the helmet on. Now, if you can imagine carrying all that stuff up hills that slope about 75 degrees, then you've got a good idea of what. And it amazes me, I think back on, I used to be able to do that. But if I tried it now, I think I'd drop dead. But
So it's a lot of moving,
here, you can
place to place.
see, same thing. Here, we'll take the sponge out so you can put the helmet on. Let's say you can feel it's not real light, but okay, go ahead, Justin.
Oh, this.
This rifle is heavy.
It weighs 9.5 pounds. So let's say we're carrying all that stuff. You want to try?
Here, I'll hold it. Can you put that in?
And so you run up and down hills. You can see it. When the war first started, it was in June of 1950. There was an awful lot of heat exhaustion and heat stroke because the American troops weren't used to it. There are quite a few rivers in Korea. One of the main ports is Busan down here, which is where they had what was called the Busan perimeter. When the war started, the North Koreans were pushing all the way down the peninsula. And they didn't have much opposition for one reason. The troops that they faced were Army troops that had been in Japan, stationed in Japan after World War II. And they were in a bad situation because they'd been living pretty easy in Japan. A lot of them had houseboys on a military pay. If you can imagine, Japan was just coming through the end of the World War II, and the economy was really messed up. You got paid in military payments per certificates, MPCs, and the going rate was 360 yen for $1. So a lot of them had hired houseboys to shine their shoes and all this kind of stuff. And another thing that was bad was when they did have to go to Korea, the weapons they got, some of them had just been packed away for 5 years. And of course, you can imagine what kind of condition they were in. Also, the kind of physical condition that they had been in, which probably wasn't their fault, because Japan is crowded. It's well populated, and of course, anytime you got a military outfit, you have to have room to practice maneuvers and all this kind of stuff, and there wasn't a lot of room for them to do that. So they had several things going against them when they went to Korea. South Korean Army was not very well trained. When things got really bad, they took civilians off the streets and sent them north, and some of them didn't even know how to fire a rifle. So they were in pretty bad shape also. It kept pushing farther and farther south until, as I say, they had down here at the port of Busan what's called a Busan perimeter. And there's a river down here which serves as kind of a barrier. And the good thing about this was the ships were able to come in and bring in supplies and new troops. And eventually, they were able to break out. Now, the 1st Marine Division was sent over there, and they were what's called a firefighting force or fireman force. And they were moved around wherever they were needed. And they were just getting ready to break out of the Busan perimeter. And General MacArthur decided that he wanted to make the landing in Incheon, which is up here, halfway up the coast. And the reason he wanted to do that was because, as you can see, from North Korea to South Korea is a good distance. And you have to keep up a good supply chain. And you can see how far it would be the supplies would have to go to get down here. So they were getting kind of low on supplies. So MacArthur decided if they made the landing up here at Incheon, that they could cut off the supply lines and then all the North Koreans would be trapped down here. Well, they made the landing. They captured Seoul, which was the capital. And however, they weren't able to cut off all the North Koreans moving out, and they moved up the east side of the peninsula, and most of them got away. So after that, after they captured the capital of Seoul, they continued to move northward, and this is where MacArthur got in trouble. He overstepped his authority, and eventually he was replaced by Matthew Ridgway. The war continued, and the troops continued to move north. And here is where we had a lot of problems. In Korea, the railroads, the gauge is maybe 3.5 feet. Roads are not roads. Most of them are cart paths for oxen. So it was pretty hard to move around. And northward there was only one road, and on the west side there was only one road. And MacArthur, as I say, this is where he messed up. He wanted the Army units to go up the west coast and the Marine units to go up the east coast and eventually move up to the Yalu River, which separates North Korea from China. And the farther north they got, the more the Chinese became upset about how close they were getting to China. So through India, which was neutral, although they did send an ambulance corps to Korea, through India, the Chinese warned MacArthur that they were coming in, and of course he didn't believe them. And so the farther north they moved, they got out here on a limb, and the Chinese tactics were usually they would assault from the front and from both sides, and then they would send someone around to the rear. So when all three of these started moving towards, the people would try to retreat, and when they did, they ran right into where the roads were blocked off.
So how do you feel about MacArthur?
In the Marine Corps, we call him Dugout Doug, and the reason is, I don't know. We feel like he was pretty much of a prima donna. We couldn't figure out, I say we, the Marine Corps, we couldn't figure out how he could run a war here in Korea 700 miles away in Japan. But that's the way the war was run. And it was just, I don't know. Anyway, this 8th Army going up the west coast was almost completely annihilated, and they had to fall all the way back. The bad thing about this plan was, as you can see, the mountains here, and they got up about this far, and winter set in when it was, 35, 40 degrees below zero. And they wanted, MacArthur and his intelligence people wanted the 1st Marine Division to come up and cross these mountains, which are anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 feet high, and support the flank of the 8th Army. Now, if you can imagine trying to move a division over a 10,000 high mountain range with snow on the peaks and 30 degrees below zero, you can see that's kind of goofy. So anyway, both sides got pushed back. Fighting continued to go on and on and on for a year. Every time they would bring up truce talks, the North Koreans and Chinese would say, okay, let's talk. And while they were talking, they would be reinforcing their troops, and which, is not, I won't say fair, but, not the way to do things. And then they'd put another offensive on. Finally, in 1953, they came to the truce table for 2 reasons, I guess. One was Stalin, who was the dictator in Russia. Russia had furnished the North Koreans airplanes and tanks, and that was another reason the South Koreans were so bad off. After the election, Sigmund Rhee was elected, and he was American educated. He went to Harvard, was one of the schools he went to, and he wanted to unite the whole peninsula of Korea, not where it would be north and south anymore, but just one Korea. And the American government would not give his troops any good-sized weapons. They had machine guns, and they had these bazookas, as they were called, which most of you probably know what I'm talking about. The long thing looks like a stovepipe that fires a rocket. They had 2.5, and these would hit the Russian tanks and just bounce off. Later, when they got the 3.5, which was an inch larger, and got the type of shell that would penetrate the armor and explode, then they were a lot better off. But and the guy that was running North Korea then was Kim Il Sung, and he's the father of the guy that's running North Korea now. And of course, he's just like his daddy was. He wants all of Korea. They finally in July '53 they signed a truce, which is not really, making the war over. One of the things that was odd was when they would have the peace talks, they would make the United Nations troops drive in with white flags on their Jeeps. And of course, the purpose of this was to show everybody else in the world, white flag, means what? Surrender. So they used it as a propaganda tool. They'd show all these Americans and British coming in for the truce talks with white flags. So they'd say, oh boy, we won. Look at them surrendering. There were a lot of atrocities during the war. The North Koreans were probably worse than the Chinese were. There were several instances where American troops found American prisoners that had been captured. They had their hands tied behind the back and they'd been shot in the back of the head. And the Chinese, a lot of the Chinese, some of them had even been to the United States. And they treated the prisoners, from what I've heard, they treated the prisoners a lot better than the North Koreans did.
So did you experience any of that firsthand?
No, not any of the shooting or anything. Let's say those were all Army troops. But let's say they signed the truce, and they had to move back 1,500 meters both ways. And there's the DMZ, it's called demilitarized zone, is about 3 miles wide now. And of course, they're heavily guarded on each side. You have guards that patrol up and down the line. And as I say, the bad thing about it is after the war was over, we had 150-something thousand casualties. Over 33,000 of those were KIAs, killed in action. And that's something else that kind of gets to me. What's the name of the Korean automobile?
Subaru?
No, that's Japanese. The Kia.
Oh, Kia.
And how you spell that?
KIA.
KIA, killed in action. So, as I say, anyway, they have the DMZ now. And it's still patrolled heavily. And of course, if you've been reading the papers or watching TV, there's a big nuclear thing going on between the countries. When I left Korea, we left from Incheon to come home. And the 1st Marine Division Band was there. And two of the songs that I remember them playing, the first one was California, Here I Come, which everybody cheered. And then they played Dixie. And of course, all the Southern kids, just went wild when they played Dixie. We came, it took us 14 days to get home on the ship. And the last night, the following morning, when we were getting close, nobody went to sleep. Everybody stayed up all night long. Everybody was up on the deck, waiting. Then all of a sudden, we could see these big orange supports through the fog's lifting. We could see the supports of the Golden Gate Bridge. We could hear horns honking up on the bridge. And of course, everybody went wild because we were home. And we got off the ship. The sun was up. And it was good to see. Of course, the officers got off first. And it was good to see them run out and embrace their wives and kids. And of course, every time a guy would kiss his wife, all the guys on board would cheer and yell. And so it was a good time. And to say the sad thing about it, we had 33,000 Americans killed there. The Chinese, North Koreans lost over 2 million wounded and killed. And today, we're right back where we started. So it's just, somebody once told me that if they let the mamas run the world, we wouldn't have any more wars. And I guess that's right. You're not going anywhere, you're staying home. Yes, ma'am. So that might be a good idea. I don't know. But I hope I've given you a little bit information about what went on and showed you some of the equipment that was used. And
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when you came into Incheon, what did you do for the 2 years that you were there?
what did I do? What?
Like what did you do every day when you were?
Oh, well, we were just there one day. We got off the ships, and then we lined up. Of course, all the replacements were on this side, and all the guys that were leaving were on the other side. And of course, they were all hollering, "You'll be sorry."
Where were you when MacArthur got a place?
He was, I can't remember exactly when. He was, let me get my cheat sheet. Let's see, I can't remember exactly when that was. I don't have it down here. But as I say, Matthew Ridgway took MacArthur's place. And of course, I said one reason we don't like MacArthur, he was kind of a publicity hound. And any time that Ridgway would get ready to make a big offensive move, he'd fly over from Japan in his airplane and show up. You know, and of course it didn't take the North Koreans and the Chinese to realize, well, every time he comes in, they're going to do something, so let's be ready. So finally Ridgway asked him one time, please don't come over anymore, unless it's, sometime other than when we get ready to have an offensive. So I don't know. It's just, but I'd say it was quite an experience. Not as exciting as the one my brother had in South Pacific. He made several landings in South Pacific. But as I say, I hope I've kind of informed you about what's going on and what was happening and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, glad to do it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. McElwain asked me, he said, would you